I've never varied from the story of what happened, and I just could care less about it.
I thought it was interesting though that Tom was very. It hurt him more than I think I've ever heard him say.
I have no idea how Jackie thinks of me. I haven't talked to him. That was the one handling that negotiation.
Robin had that wonderful chemistry, but I watched the one where she ignored you. You had no idea why, and she wouldn't tell you, which was great. And then obviously the one where I'm not doing the news, because she was on the beach and she couldn't read. Just tell me about that relationship you guys had, because she's definitely changed since you left. She doesn't have anybody really being a foil, but you would get under her skin, and it was great. And those were some of my two favorite. There's a bunch more, obviously, but the fact that she was like, I'm not speaking to Jackie.
she's like she knows where her bread is buttered, so she is a phrase away from, destroying her whole thing, but she's a character. But we had a very strange relationship, and Howard is, not to be insulting, but he I don't think he grew up the same way, or maybe things were much different when I was a kid, because, when we're like in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, you had your pals, you had the girls you hung around with, you had the guys, it was the whole thing. And even in college, there were so many girls that were like my pals. They were like, either weird or fat or for whatever reason, just somebody I just wasn't attracted to, and I had no intention of ever doing anything with them. And they knew it, and so we were pals. And there were times where we'd be fooling around, and I would grab Robin, not on the air, but we'd be talking, and I would throw her down on the couch and hop on and start humping her leg. But totally, as silly as it sounds, but it was totally platonic. It was me. I never said it out loud, but it was me fucking around with the fat girl. You know what I mean? There was nothing sexual about it. It was just me being goofy, and she'd giggle and be a whole thing, and Howard would be like, boy, you really love Robin, don't you? Man, you're really attracted to her. I couldn't say, no, she's the fat chick that I have no intention of ever fucking. But you can't say that. I would never say that to whether it hurt her feelings. I'm not saying it like I was invited. Don't get me wrong. But the point was there was nothing sexual about it, but he just didn't comprehend that. And he'd talk about how, I was so attracted to her and blah, blah, blah. And it was ridiculous. But I did love screwing with her, because she would, she could be so pompous, and she was an idiot, The one thing she did that really enamored me to her, and when I realized what we were all in for the whole ride, we had just gone to mornings, and I was a regular cast member. I probably told you this story already. And one day I came in and I said, I was learning that everything's for the air, not to say anything in the office, because everything is fodder. You got 5 hours to fill. And I said, Howard, I got to tell you, I had a really wild, graphic, realistic sex dream about Robin last night. I mean, it was so realistic. And I wasn't lying. I mean, I really had I don't know if it was a wet dream. I was already 38 years old, but it was very, very real, And so we all laughed, and it was pretty wild. And that's where he got on the whole thing with Jackie so attracted. The point was I wasn't attracted to her, and the fact that happened I thought was pretty funny. But what really endeared me to her was like a week later or 2 weeks later, she came on the air and said, Howard, I have an admission to make. Last night I had a really wild sex dream about Jackie. And I thought, how cool is it that she would admit that? She knew it was great fodder, and it was very, very funny. I'm sure they never replay that. Anything that's glamorizes Jackie doesn't get played. But that was to me, that was like, wow, that's You know, who else? That was like Gary admitting about his girlfriend making fun of him and stuff. You know, you just gave everything. You know, you just gave everything. And I thought that was pretty cool.
You guys subliminally were.
She got a little big for her britches, but that's all right. She needed big britches.
Well, and that's the weird. Howard just depends on her for some weird. It's very odd how much he talks about how much he needs her, because I think a lot of people think he doesn't need her, but it's very odd when you hear him talking.
You know who says that he doesn't need her? The same people that say, why did Costello have Bud Abbott hanging around? He didn't need him. If you ever saw Lou Costello without Bud Abbott, you couldn't get to the door quick enough. It's a very give-take relationship, you know, at least for what he's doing, you know. He could go on any show and do anything. And could he sit there and talk for 5 hours? I'm sure. But there's a whole different thing with tossing it back and forth. You know, they want to give me a show. I do a lot of podcasts. I talk to a million different people. You know, I did 3 already. You're my 3rd guy today. Because I love talking. I love telling the stories. And I love the whole thing and promoting stuff. But they want to give me a show. And I don't know if I do a show, I got to have somebody. I got to have somebody to talk to. Even just an engineer to say, blah, 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 blah. You know? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You got to toss the ball a little bit. You know, it's very interesting.
Well, it's good to see you can get that instant. Was this funny to somebody? And the fact that she laughs at everything, it makes it good.
Right. That is a little crazy, you know, because people say, "Oh, I can always tell Jackie when you wrote a joke because you laughed." I said, "No. What I do is I laugh at everything that's funny, and I laugh depending on how funny it is. And sometimes if it's something Fred wrote or something Howard said on his own, and it's really funny, I will scream, and people assume that I wrote it, and I'm not just laughing because I wrote it. I laugh when something's really funny. And so fortunately, a lot of things I wrote I thought were really funny or I wouldn't have written them. But her, you could say, you know, Bill Gates just got hit by a truck and she goes, Robin, you got really big tits. Robin, I think I'm going to have diarrhea. You know, it didn't matter what he says. It's the same laugh every time, which is pretty, it's weird. But, you know, 40 years later, she's still, so I guess somebody likes it.
I don't know if she's still doing it. I haven't heard a lot of late, but I guess she's still doing it. Couple more minutes with you, Jackie. I appreciate it. I did talk to Tom Chiusano. I think you may have seen that, and I thought it was interesting how he felt really bad about this the history of 20 years ago.
I don't want to talk about leaving the show. It's been up and down and all around, and nobody admitted this, and then they admitted that. And people say to me, you know, Jackie, when you talk about that, it's the same story that you told 20 years ago. I'm like, because that's what happened. I've never varied from the story of what happened, and I just could care less about it.
I thought it was interesting though that Tom was very. It hurt him more than I think I've ever heard him say. You know,
it was a regrettable decision on his part. I liked Jackie and still, you know, think kindly of Jackie. I have no idea how Jackie thinks of me. I haven't talked to him. I was the one handling that negotiation, and as I had in the past, and he had, we had tough negotiations prior to that. You know, if I remember correctly, where he had walked for a little bit, and and Howard always wanted him back. But in this one in particular, I had made sure that, Howard and I had conversations about it. He knew exactly what I was doing. I had talked to my boss, who was Mel, and said, this is, and made sure that I had all the money in line and, had approvals for the money that I was offering him and all those kinds of things. I put what was a very generous offer, what I believe was a very generous offer to Jackie on the table, guaranteed employment. I won't go into the specifics of it. But it was it should have been a life changer for him, given where he was and had been. And I actually remember some of my words in the meeting. I looked at him and said, Jackie, I should be the guy trying to, to downplay you, to not take this offer, because it's a lot. I'm putting a lot on the table, but Jackie had encouraged me when I came back from cancer to kind of go on, when we started going on the road trips to Vegas, to make sure that I came, and said, why wouldn't you take it? Why not come? And so I appreciated that, and I appreciated the sense that I had of Jackie's caring about me at that point, and I tried to express that to him in this final meeting that we had, and I even said, I'm trying to remember the guy's name from MASH who left. And I used him as an analogy. The old TV show MASH, one of the main characters, left the show. And I said, don't be that guy. Stevenson, I think, was his last name.
Yeah, it was Hawkeye and Jamie Farr are the only two people, like Radar, the two people.
Yeah, but it was I think it was the first colonel, who was the boss of the MASH unit. And I said, don't be that guy. This is a serious offer. It's a lot of money, and we'd like you to stay. Obviously, I wouldn't put this on the table if we don't want you to stay. And he decided at that point that it wasn't good enough for him. And everybody, as I said, Howard knew, and the other principals that needed to know knew. And when he tried to come back after rejecting the proposal, it was decided. It wasn't my decision. It wasn't my end of the day decision. But it was decided that, no, time to move on. And I've always felt bad about that. If somehow this is reaching you, Jackie, I hope you understand that. I really did. I really did want you to take that. I really did want you to be part of it. But it was decided, it was enough, because what was going to happen the next time we went around.
I might work.
I wish I'd been able to encourage him with found the right words to make that offer stick with him to where he would have taken it.
I think he was Mr. Business Guy, but
so the good news is, so you're saying he's still alive, which is great, because I had no idea if he's still alive. Are you talking about recently?
Yeah, and I was curious if you guys would ever have do you have any hard feelings with Tom, or is that? No. Could be, in all fairness to Tom, he had no say in any of it. It was all Howard and Buckwalter. Yeah, Tom, it was kill the messenger. When I told them I would take the job back, and they said they would get back to me, I thought it was so rude and cruel after 18 years to not have the class to call up and say, we don't want you back, we're going to pass. But that was not Tom's decision. He couldn't have called me up and said, Jackie, we're not taking you back. That was not his decision to make. I don't know that, but I know that. I'm sure I could hear Mel or Howard or Don say, fuck him, let him hang out to dry. I never had a problem with Tom. When Howard signed his contract back then, it was in the middle of December. He said, well, you can make your deal with Tom. And Tom made the offer. I said, no, that's not what I want. And he said, and I knew he either had cancer or he was going to have cancer. And I said, listen, take your trip to Paris and we'll talk about it when you get back. Who knew if the guy was going to die in 2 days? He's a human being. I'm a human being. I always liked him. He, as much as I fucked with him, that was my job, But he was a good guy, and he still is a good guy. And if he's still alive and kicking, I'm glad to hear that. So he is. He was.
Maybe, what? Now that I know that, maybe I'll search him down and tell him I said hello. Maybe buy a steak for him or something.
I said I'm gonna try to get you both together at some point on this thing.
No. You don't have. I don't want somebody to orchestrate it. I'll chase him down. You can send me his contact info if you got it, because I'm, for all I know, he's got the same email 30 years later. Who knows?
He's not at K-Rock anymore. I did want to ask you. I've never asked you about your days with Eddie Murphy and the back days. When did you first see him, and when did you know right away? Because it was you guys crossed paths. Tell me about just those days back in the early, I guess, late 70s, early 80s.
It's funny because I'm back in touch with Clint. There's a really, really great story about Eddie and Clint in the car with me and Dave Hawthorne. And it was a story when Howard always used to say, well, if you guys had driven Eddie an extra 100 yards, you'd all be in the movies. And his best friend Clint was in the car. And and Clint, they just redid Coming to America, and Clint is one of the guys in the barbershop.
Right. He was
Three of
the
the guys are Eddie, and one of them is Arsenio, and the other one's Clint, And I've been talking recently to the old guys. I was talking to Rob Bartlett and Minervini, some of the guys that, were at Dixon's White House Inn when we all hung there. And Eddie was like 16 or 17 years old, when I met him, when we all met him. And it was so funny because he was a nice guy, but he was so, and I don't even know if the word is cocky. He was so sure of himself. He was like, I'm going to be bigger than the Beatles. We're like, Eddie, shut up. I'm going to be bigger than the Beatles. And this famous story is like I was making my second comedy album at the East Side, and he said, Jack, those microphones, you making another album? And I said, yeah. He said, Jack, I want to have an album. I said, I'd love to help you, Eddie, but I'm too busy. Could you imagine if I had helped him with his first album? I'd be living in Malibu, But I
would call you delirious, actually, if you catch them.
I didn't find them all that funny. In the beginning, just about everything he did was, he basically just did Richard Pryor and Richard Pryor material, and then he just replaced Richard Pryor with Eddie material, which is even better. But I didn't think it was, I have audio tape of everybody from back then except him. I never turned on the tape recorder. I was not a fan of somebody. I didn't think somebody was funny just because they were black. I just didn't. And it was that simple. And he was very, it wasn't racist at all. I just didn't find it funny. But he was a nice enough guy. And, we went on to, I'll send you the stories, like when we're in the cars together, we'd all go out to do gigs, and it was great. And they needed a black guy for Saturday Night Live, and boom, he went to the moon. His first manager, Richie Tinkin, owned the comic strip in Manhattan, and then the one in Fort Lauderdale too. And Richie just passed away 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he was, one of the great guys, one of the great club owners, and him and another owner of the comic strip took on Eddie as a client. And, a year later they're driving around in white Rolls Royces and everything, they were bums from the Bronx, and boom, but great characters. But Murphy was fine, and I ran into him here or there. I ran into him years later when we had just started the Channel 9 show, and for some reason, maybe we were broadcast, I forget, but I was at the China Club, and Eddie was there, and so he said, "Hey, Jackie, Eddie Murphy's over there." So I went over and said hello to him. He said, "Jack, that Channel 9 show you guys do, that is the funniest thing on television."
Interesting fellow for sure. I appreciate him coming on the show. And once again, if you have anybody you'd like to see me interview, make sure you throw it in the comments. I'm always trying to dig deep. Kind of done everybody I can think of that would do the show. But if you have any thoughts, let me know, and make sure you subscribe. Last interview I want to play for you today is Vinny Favale. And I was always curious, how did Vinny even come about? How did he become part of this Stern universe? He worked his way in just like he did with the David Letterman universe. He did both sides. I always thought that was interesting. So here's my chat with Vinny.
Would tell anyone that would listen, we got to do something, Howard. We got to do something, Howard. And I was in a position to make something happen, and it was great. We set up. I pitched the idea, or the idea that we should do something with Howard, and that's when the Saturday night show came in. Which I said, let's not lie. Let's call it what it is: the Howard Stern Radio Show, which is what it was—a TV show that was basically the radio show. Excuse me, and that's when I got to work with Howard. And I, as a longtime listener, I'm sure you know, when you're in the Howard real world of working with him, whether you're his housekeeper or you bring him his coffee or whatever's in his world, if you're open to it, he'll pull you in. And I was absolutely open to it because I was such a fan, and that's how that happened. So there were days where then when Jackie left, I had been with the show long enough that Howard wanted me to sit in for some shows, which was amazing. That was another experience. And there were some days where I would be like, holy shit, I'm starting my day on the Howard Stern show on the air. And then I am in the afternoon. I was working with Letterman every day, but there were times when I was on the Letterman show just as myself, and I'm like, this is too weird. And I'm proud to say I stopped and appreciated those moments. I'm like, this is gonna end. It's not always gonna be great. It may not even end great, but it's an incredible moment in time. And it was more than a few occasions where that happened. So it was wonderful.
Yeah, so the Howard, I want to do Letterman kind of towards the end because that's obviously a big part, but I love the Howard Stern stuff. So how many meetings do you have with Howard a week? I mean, did he know you at this point, or did you become, because you're...
Oh, with Howard, it was incredible. We were partners in developing the show. We worked like closely together. So before we launched the CBS show, we spent a lot of time together. He's a great guy, like a great guy. And the off-the-air Howard was so, in some ways, so similar, but also different. Like really a business guy, and really, like Dave, completely micromanaging in a good way every aspect of the show. It wasn't just like stick a camera in here and put it on CBS. He had thoughts and opinions and strong feelings about a lot of things. So we were real partners on that. And going, when you're in the Howard world, there's weekly meetings, and unlike late night TV, the meetings, everyone is there. It's not just the writers. That's the great thing about Howard. A good idea is a good idea no matter where it came from. And with Howard, it was like we hit the ground running, super, super close, which allowed that ease on air, I think.
What you said you sat in, so were you starting to get these feelings of, I know I'm a vice president at Dave Letterman, but what if, because that chair was open, Craig Gass was there, Artie, Ron Zimmerman, all these guys came through. Were you ever in your mind going, well, I wonder if I just took this, what if they offered me this job just to sit here and be in the Jackie chair? Did that ever come across your mind?
No, I never thought I was good enough for that. And also I was very happy with my job. It was amazing. What I questioned is how am I getting away with this? I am saying the wrong thing. I'm like one word away from blowing up my whole career, especially back then where it was a lot more frank conversation going on about the world. So no, I never aspired to that, but it was a thrill. It was amazing. And I felt very, very lucky. And then over time, they rotated different people, but we were still doing the show, and the funny thing is you didn't have to sit in the chair to be on the show. A lot of the things that I did was when there were a couple of times where Howard just wanted me to sit on the couch, like when Ringo was there, which I'm still embarrassed by, my performance while Ringo, I helped produce that segment, and then I proceeded to not let Ringo answer any of the questions. I was correcting him, which was a disaster. So I felt like I was part of the show already, regardless of where I was in the studio, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, I was looking. You were on the September 10th show with Craig Gass, 2001.
Yeah.
So that's the day before.
I had to go to. It was crazy. I would have been on the 11th as well, but I had to go to LA to pitch Jump the Shark. We were doing the Jump the Shark game show. So yeah, it was. In fact, I was in LA when 9/11 happened, and it was just Howard was amazing what he did during that whole time.
I was a huge Artie fan. I love that he got the chair. I felt like it was like the second rebirth. Tell me I'm guessing, I always ask for an update.
Jackie was great, by the way.
They were both great. And that's what, I always have that conversation. It's like, it's two different shows and they're both great. I mean, there's no difference to me. And that's probably true. But Artie, do you keep in touch? Do you have an update? People are wondering where he is, so let's ask.
No, and this is the one case where I'm taking no news is good news. I recently got a note from his sister Stacy to connect on LinkedIn, which I thought was a wonderful sign that okay, this is great. We had a beautiful exchange. I said, gave my best to Artie. I didn't want to intrude, but I'm the pictures. He looks amazing, except for whatever physical problem with the nose. And I don't know if that's just him as a reminder to not go down that trail again, or maybe he's done something with it already. But he's a good-looking guy, and the great guy, just great, salt of the earth guy. I basically call him and Jackie the old Darren and the new Darren from Bewitched. They were both great, in their own way.
Yeah. No, Jackie was on here, and I was trying to say, Jackie, why did you leave? And he pretty much just said, I was drinking and I was going to get divorced and I couldn't wake up. And I see a lot of comments of people going, he's not answering. Why won't he answer the question? So it is funny because he did leave the Beatles, as you know.
You know what? There's a documentary that's supposed to be coming out on. I know I spoke to the to the director on camera about it, but I think he dives into it in more depth in the documentary. But look, I think they call this bluff, and sometimes when that happens, it's like, what do you do? And I think all those things added up. But he looks great. I think he's healthier now than he's ever been. Jackie, that is, and Artie too, hopefully. But it was a run. It was an amazing run.
You made and you you would call in from what? You're on the train, right? So what does an executive do?
On the bus. I was going to do a fight with Donald Trump on the bus. This was amazing,
What were you doing riding out? You're a VP and you're riding the bus into work, and then you're calling the biggest radio show. Tell me a little bit about
Stuttering John couldn't understand, why aren't I in a limousine? I'm like, what kind of world do you live in? I live in the suburbs. When you live in the suburbs of Jersey, you could take a train, you could take a bus, or you could drive in. Driving in is insane. Why would you drive in when you could be driven in? It just happens to be a bus. I know a bus does feel low rent, but trust me, it was a very white-collar bus. And I would whisper in a very creepy way various things, the ratings, or get into fights. I once got into a brutal fight on the air, more than once, but it was fun.
I remember the one you were talking. The one I'm thinking about is Stuttering John when he's going to work for Jay. So you call in. And you are so, you're defending Dave to the tilt, but you're whispering on the bus. It's just because Stuttering John, but
guy, no, really, Dave is not. He's got the better audience, a Democrat. I know, it was so creepy.
It was funny though. So yeah,
I did appreciate how much fun that would be for the show, even if it was at my expense. Same thing with Debbie tapes. I knew I was after Gary released his tapes. I was like, oh man, I wonder if I'm remembering these correctly. I think mine were sweet and romantic and blah, 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 blah. And then I remember telling Gary, hey, I had I didn't tell Howard, tell Gary. And then Gary threw me under the bus one day. We were getting to somewhat of a tiff on air. And he goes, hey, Vinny, tell Howard about your tapes. And Howard seized on that. And when I had to buy a Betamax machine so I could play the tapes. And Debbie would tell you, I was mortified. I'm like, oh my God, this is psycho shit. No one will ever see this stuff. And Debbie was laughing so hard. And then finally I realized this is really good for the show. So I gave them a small part of it.
That was a bad idea. Gary, I think, got like $30,000. What? Those tapes? Those tapes scare me a little bit, Vinny. I got to be honest. But Debbie.
Listen. I won't argue with you there.
Does Dave say to you, "What are you doing?" Now, come on, you can be on the show, but now we've crossed the line.
He was aware. There was one time where I do remember where Howard was really angry at Dave, and I don't know how much was wrestling or not. You hear the anger, and then he's kind of smiling when you're in there sometimes, but it came off as really, really bad. And I fought back and I defended Dave, and Dave called me and he said, I really appreciate that, which I thought was nice. He goes, I don't know what's going on with Howard. I always thought we had a high regard for each other. But a lot of it was just the wrestling and stuff. I think Dave might have been amused by it, maybe annoyed sometimes because I wasn't spending time. I should have been more attention to the show. But this was it was 6 a.m, 7 a.m, 8 a.m. I mean, there were times where I would get into work at 8, and I'd go there to do something. I'd be sitting in, there'd be something going on, and I'd be at my desk at 9 o'clock. It's not that it took anything away from those other things. So, but I don't know what he really thought, but I just love that they're good friends now, which is amazing.
Yeah, and so the Howard relationship just comes from the CBS show, right? That's when you first kind of get to know him, and then you work with him,
really it.
And he just likes you, right? And he starts to like you, right? I mean, that's pretty much how he just decides. I really like Vinny.
It's a combination of liking you, but even if he didn't like you, if he thought it was good for the show, you're in, so either way, it's great. But I actually met Howard before the CBS years. When I was at Comedy Central, I pitched, he ended up doing it, but we pitched it to him before. And he came in with his agent, Don Buchwald, and we pitched cameras in the studio. And he said, I don't want to do that. It'll ruin the surprise, da, 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 da. Then he pitched him a one-on-one interview show. Do you remember when he had a show? Yeah. I remember when he interviewed Phil Hartman, and he brought Phil's wife out at the time, and she was on camera. And then later on, what ended up happening was so freaky. But like that, so that was the smarter thing what they did, because that started a relationship with them. And then when Howard was ready where the technology got better with the lipstick cameras and you could really hide them, those old shows look amazing. I mean, Doug Goodstein, I know you had Doug on, was part of that team, and Ganji, an incredible, and Scott DePace. What those guys did is amazing. Those shows, I mean, and we're talking like thousands of shows. Not, one radio show might yield 4 episodes, right? So
I want to get Scott on here. I don't know if he's interested in talking about it, but I think about that.
Sure he would.
So many cameras, so much going on, especially in that little studio. But then when you get the bigger studio, plus Howard has an angle that he wants, so he'll call Scott in to yell at him because the angle he doesn't like, which is always funny to me.
Right.
What was it like when Howard would go on Dave? Because
Download the Domino's app today and become a Piece of the Pie Rewards member to earn points toward free pizza.
Howard always made a big deal of this, and I know Dave, I'm assuming, really enjoyed because it was probably very easy for him that night. What was it like for you, though? Because you're sort of that in-between guy. Did you just get to...
worlds colliding. It was great, except for one time was horrible, and I'll tell you that in a second. But it was like a circus. It was great. 53rd Street, which is the side entrance, it was like the Beatles are on. It was crazy. All the fans would be out there. The paparazzi would always be lined up, but they were out in full force whenever Howard was on, and Howard would be very generous with his time and linger out there and sign autographs and take pictures. And then it would be, he never did a pre-interview, which is mandatory with most guests, so you never knew what was going to happen. So it was always great. And then afterwards, it was always like a high of, did I do good? You did great. All that kind of conversation. The one time, which was a nightmare, was when he was battling with my boss, Leslie Moonves, and it was really ugly, like really, really bad. And he said he was going to wear something on the show that make a statement, and I'm like, no, don't, you can't. This is wrong. Da, da, da. And I didn't get my way, and he had on the shirt like what it said. I hate the picture of Leslie. I hate Leslie. That kind of thing. And Leslie took it in good stride, but. That day wasn't fun. That wasn't a fun night. Tragedy was time. A lot of time yields great stories and comedy, but in the moment, it was pretty ugly.
Well, how hard was it? Because Dave's your boss. Howard wants to come on. He wants to do some weird stuff. I mean, does Howard? Are you and him conduits to each other, or is it Howard still just doing the?
No, I'm just trying to. He's laughing at my torture, and really, my boss was Leslie Moonves. It was Dave and Leslie, But I was a CBS employee, not an employee of Worldwide Pants. So it was dicey. It was a minefield everywhere you went.
All right, so you're known most famously on the Stern Show for Restless. I never saw the video till yesterday when I was doing research. I actually researched for these things, and I saw the video of you guys doing it. And I think the problem Howard had, obviously, first was that you did it in his studio, around his studio on off hours. So did you know that would get out? Did you want that to get out? Because
the story's actually different.
Okay,
I did that. The original Restless was recorded at WNBC.
Is this on the box set? The 4-box set of the Restless?
Yeah. Tom and I were in my office, and Tom worked for actually worked for WNBC, and I worked for WYY, the FM. So we're on the same floor, and Tom and I were budding songwriters. So we had this song, and we recorded that demo. Like in '82, and then one day, word got out at K-Rock, because Tom then was at K-Rock. He was the head of business affairs. He would sign their paychecks, and Tom's a great guy, and they would be like, "Do you know that Tom? Tom's very corporate. Tom and Vinny write songs and write songs forever, like the idiot." Because we were playing them in the office one day, Tom and I, and then we said we should re-record that Restless one. So we recorded it. Right. And then Howard was, I think, mock angry. I think he just loved the idea. It's like, what the fuck are you guys doing? and it was, you know, again, a disaster that was made for great radio.
Yeah. And normally on the contests that were had on the Stern Show, I'd always be like, "Oh, that's fixed." You know, like Winfred's job, like Gary. I know Richard and Sal did a great job, but the guys who won this contest, that song they put together, it's so good, and like I sing the way they sing it. It's so
the country guy, right?
Yeah, the restless.
It's a great.
Those guys should be. I mean, to do that with that song, and I'm sorry, Vinny. The song is funny, but for them to make that thing sound like that is amazing.
Well, so here's the thing with that, which was incredible. They got over 1,000 entries, and the rules were very liberal. It's like all you have to do is use the words. Okay, so you could if you could find the melody or rhythm, great. We wrote it like a Ramones song, and there was one submission that was exactly the way we had it, and it's actually pretty damn fucking good. But anyway, these other people, they brought their brilliance. They, their musical skills, their talents, their vocals, their arrangements. And it was not fixed at all. We got over 1,000 entries, and then we did the show, and my buddy John Tita from Warner Chappell was one of the judges, and the three top ones, including, how about Robert Goulet? How great was that?
How did they get him? Who, they just know him, or someone knew him? I guess
one of the, you know what, the show didn't do it.
Was like a fan, I think, but
Ernest Lupinacci is a guy who's a big fan of the show. Look, the Howard Stern show, some of the fans are like really big deals, like rock stars and movie stars and directors and writers. And Ernest is one of those guys. Ernest is a great, he did a bunch of promos for ESPN. You might remember where Goulet sang them, doing Vegas style arrangements. And being a big fan of the show, he was able to get Goulet and William Shatner to each do a version that he produced, that he oversaw. They did a great job. They trusted him.
His is good too. I can sing his too. You wore your purple dress into a Beetlejuice.
Did you see me get into a fight with him though? I was like, you got the lyrics all wrong. Like, the guy is down. She left him, but you make it sound like, hey, bring on the next one.
I mean, it's funny because all of them were great. But yeah, how many times were you on the show? Like, just even via call-ins, or how many times did you go in? Can you think of how many?
Yeah. Hundreds. I mean, just a lot. It was over a long period of time. The last time I was on was when Howard let me come on to promote the primetime special that I produced on Letterman's final week. And that was great. That was nice. Howard was very generous with his time. And, the show evolves. There's a lot of guests that were on back in the day that aren't on anymore. It's a different atmosphere now. So, but the guys, everyone that works here is fantastic. Gary and John, Richard and Sal, Benji's, love him. They're great guys.